activity is seen as most dangerous for enterprises? Hacktivism, malware, APTs, simple data steal. How RSA sees this threat?
Oh boy. So that's a lot of threats that you just listed. I mean, part of the challenge around this is that the threats are quite varied, right? Some of the threats there may be very widespread, but not particularly dangerous, right? So we see, for example, hacktivists and some others trying to cause damage and the like. That's for many organizations not considered as risky. The things that I worry about the most are the very advanced threats, because the very advanced threats are stealing extremely valuable intellectual property, and that intellectual property can be worth huge amounts of money. Tough even to quantify, millions, hundreds of millions more. I mean, very, very valuable information. So those are the ones we worry about, because number one, the value of the information that could be stolen is very great. And secondly, the motivations of the attackers are very great as well, because those attackers are willing to spend a lot of time and effort to go after you. And that is quite scary and difficult to defend against.
APT is thought to be military-grade attacks against a commercial entity. How would you comment that?
Yeah, I think that's gross oversimplification, right? I think it is true that originally APTs and the terms came from the military, right? And certainly historically, as we've seen over the last probably 4 or 5 years, the initial attacks were focused on government targets and systems integrators. But what we've already seen quite rapidly over the last few years is those same techniques that were used for those targets are now spreading across almost every single industry. So although it's true that APT started in that very generic sense, in that very specific sense, it's now a much more generic term, and I think it applies across every single industry.
What is the future of these threats? How would you...
The future?
Yeah,
the future.
The prognosis.
At this point, there's no obvious end in sight. Right now the attackers have the advantage, and that was really the point of Art Coviello's keynote that he gave here at the conference. It was a call to arms to point out that right now we're not doing a very good job of protecting against these very high-end attacks. And so until we do a better job sharing of information and collaborating as an industry, the attackers are going to continue to have that advantage. In my opinion, I think the future is positive in that I think the industry will get its act together, and I think we will do better, and that will allow us to defend ourselves much better.
You did a good job on investigating your even known threat. I talked with Yuri about how the breach was discovered.
Yeah, I mean, considering, what we see in these sorts of attacks is typically organizations never even are aware that they're under attack and the information's been exfiltrated.
Did it take long to detect?
No, I mean we were quite I was going to say quite fortunate, but it wasn't luck. I mean we spent a lot of time to have the right kinds of infrastructure in place to be able to detect it. So no, it was a relatively short time. To do from the time of the first indication of suspicion to being able to confirm and do the forensics to show that there was a serious attack. And what we've also seen is that the experience that we've had gives us huge credibility to go after the kinds of challenges that we see in this space. I mean, so we're learning from this experience and helping other companies defend themselves.
How is RSA supporting these companies?
Yeah, so it has a lot to do with understanding the techniques to effectively detect those attacks, right? And learning how to detect, as you described, what NetWitness is a case in point, guiding organizations to be able to use those kinds of tools, whether they're ours or others, to be able to find those attacks in the first place and defend themselves. It's all about experience, and we've got a lot of experience, and we're applying it to make sure other people can defend themselves.
Is mobile threat a problem? Mobile devices connected to the corporate network?
Oh yes, a very serious one. And to the point of the conversation we just had, we're already seeing indication now of adversaries going more and more after those mobile devices to steal credentials, because it's relatively easy on those devices today. An attacker is always going to go after the soft target, the easiest target. And right now what we're seeing in our mobile devices is it's a very soft target. And so there's a lot of work to be able, I think, to be able to do a more effective job to protect those devices.
Okay, how to harden that soft target?
That's right. So, want me to explain a little bit in terms of what that's about?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So there's a few different areas. First, there's the topic of managing the devices and making sure that applications that are running on those devices have been verified that they're trustworthy applications. So configuration management, mobile device management. So we actually announced a partnership in this area with a number of companies that are building different kinds of container-based models for protecting the mobile device. So that helps, right? So that helps provide basic configuration. The second area is more effective authentication on those mobile devices. So this is where multi-factor authentication comes into play. The idea that the big advantage on a mobile device is you can pull many different factors to be able to prove who somebody is, to give a much stronger degree of confidence of who that user is. So, for example, things like geolocation, patterns of behavior on the device, what websites you access, different Wi-Fi related access, as well as biometrics in terms of things like face recognition and other things. If you combine all those factors together, you can get a very high degree of confidence of who that person is. And of course, our risk-based engine that RSA has is a natural target for that.
So we can use biometrics. We can use correlation of information from different sources.
Yep.
What the attackers could do against that?
It's tough because what happens is any one of those factors an attacker could go after. But if you have multiple factors like that, it dramatically increases the difficulty for the attack because the attacker has to go after all of them. Right? So that's part of the problem. For example, biometrics. If you just take that by itself, it's not reliable, in my opinion, not sufficiently reliable by itself. But if you combine that factor with many of the others I talked about, it helps to make up for some of those issues, the reliability issues. So the combination, gives you very strong authentication.
How would you compare the state of security of our companies against 5 years before?
It's like an arms race. I mean, our technology has improved a lot in those 5 years. At the same time, the complexity of the systems has increased a lot. I mean, the cloud is a very complicated space. We just talked about the complexity of mobile devices. You have the complexity of cloud services. That makes for it's more difficult to control and protect all those different environments. And plus, as we just talked about, the threat is more significant. The attackers are more motivated because what they're stealing is more valuable. So we keep working our way up. We keep putting more defenses in place, better collaboration, better information sharing to deal with the increased threats.
Okay. Companies tend to put their data in the cloud. How to protect them efficiently?
Yeah, so number of different issues there. I mean, first of all, part of it is making sure that all the security services that we've had for many years are deployable and consumable in the cloud. So we always start with identity, being able to have strong proof of who you are, strong authentication. So just as we talked about this notion of multi-factor authentication for mobile devices, that's a requirement to be able to access the cloud, right? You need to be able to do that and be able to have that interoperable across multiple cloud services. You can't have the different ones for different cloud services, or you get back to the complexity we were just talking about. Once we address identity, then other things that have to be addressed are, for example, data protection, so encrypting that content, as well as logging and controlling exactly who's accessing what data in the cloud, and then measuring compliance. So a number of different technologies have to be there, and then really deployed on a trustworthy platform.
Okay, how to encrypt the data in the cloud, leaving the company control over the keys? It's not easy to do that.
That's exactly right, and that's the challenge today. And I think that we still have a ways to go to have good, effective, scalable systems for key management in the cloud. I mean, we have offerings for key management, but they generally tend to be focused for large organizations on-premise. So it's moving those same sorts of key management schemes into the cloud. But the problem, as you say, is getting the keys to the right place, the right services, to decrypt and protecting those keys.